Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I've had a request to do a video on insomnia, so what I thought I'd do is I'd quickly run through some of the strategies and some of the nutritional supplements that would be helpful if you are having problems sleeping. Now, most people in their lives will go through periods where they have difficulty sleeping, and this brings me to the first reason that most people do find it difficult to get a good night's sleep, and that's stress. Stress is inevitable in life. Most people will go through periods of stress for various reasons, and stress affects people in different ways. And it affects men and women in different ways as well. Men are very good at bottling up stress. Women are more open with their feelings. And so men tend to bottle up their feelings, and sometimes they don't even realise that they're suffering from stress, and it can build up. Even small things can build up, and it can disrupt your hormonal levels and your sleep patterns. So the first thing I would recommend to anyone that's having difficulty sleeping is to have a look at your lifestyle. If you are exposed to stress, and most of us are, and you're not dealing with it well, the best way to get to the root of the problem is to get rid of the stress. Now, I know that's not always possible, and sometimes you'll have to ride out the stress and just accept that while you're going through it, you won't be able to sleep well. But I do find that most people that do complain about the fact that they can't sleep are actually going through a period of stress, and removal of the stress is one of the best ways that you can then correct your abnormal sleep patterns. So that's the first thing I'd say. This brings me to the second non-nutritional strategy for dealing with insomnia, and that's exercise. Exercise is very good for dealing with stress, because one of the problems with stress is that it releases particular patterns of hormones, and particularly cortisol and adrenaline are released during times of stress, and these can have an effect, a knock-on effect on other hormonal systems in the body. Now, exercise is a very good way of lowering these levels of stress hormones. Now, exercise itself is a stress. However, if we don't overdo it and we maintain our exercise levels at moderate kind of intensities, you find that exercise is actually a very good way of getting rid and lowering your level of these stress hormones, because you become more resistant to the effects of them. Because exercise itself is a stress, you release adrenaline and cortisol when you exercise, and therefore the body builds up a defense system against these stress hormones. They become less invasive and less effective at affecting modulating your other hormone levels, and you find that you recover more quickly from periods of stress. Those people that are physically fit tend to be able to go through periods of stress relatively unscathed. So I would suggest that if you are having problems with stress, that you look at your exercise levels as well. And this brings me to the third reason that a lot of people have difficulty sleeping, and that is too much exercise. Believe it or not, if you perform too much physical activity and at the wrong time, you can disrupt your sleep patterns. Exercising late at night, especially if you combine that with quite a large amount of food, can also be a way of disrupting your sleep patterns. So if you look at the stress in your life and you exercise, and when you exercise and how much, you can actually quite often sort out problems with sleeping. So those are some things to think about if you are having problems with sleeping. Exercise obviously also tires you out. If you perform physical activity, you do get tired, and it's a very good way of resetting the body clock. I find if you perform physical activity, you do start to get kind of sleepy towards the evening, whereas if you don't perform activity, maybe that sleepiness isn't quite so apparent. So I would look at exercise as a way of causing fatigue, but also as a way of withstanding the stresses of life and allowing you to overcome those stresses and those periods of stress with a little bit more resilience. So now, if we move, if you look at exercise and stress, those are usually two strategies that are very effective at helping people to overcome their insomnia, those periods of insomnia that we all go through. So now if we look at some of the nutritional things that you can do to help you overcome periods of insomnia, really the nutritional strategies fall into three categories. We've got dietary strategies, we've got supplements, and then we've got supplements that are herbal and therefore have a pharmaceutical effect. If we look at the first category first, one of the best ways that you can induce sleep is by eating small amounts of carbohydrate before you go to bed. I'm not talking about large carbohydrate meals. I'm just talking about fruit, a bowl of cereal, something that contains carbohydrate. Now, the reason this can be beneficial is because it can increase brain levels of tryptophan, and tryptophan is the amino acid that is converted to serotonin in the brain, and the serotonin is then converted into melatonin, and melatonin is the hormone that induces sleep. So if we increase our carbohydrate intake before we go to bed, we can increase our plasma levels of tryptophan. That tryptophan crosses the blood-brain barrier, it increases levels of serotonin, and in turn that increases levels of melatonin, and that can induce sleep. So carbohydrates are a good way of increasing brain levels of serotonin and melatonin. Another way is obviously to take the amino acid l-tryptophan. Now, l-tryptophan is available in some countries, it's banned in some countries. That's not because of anything to do with its safety. L-tryptophan is very safe. If it is available in your country, that you can take the amino acid l-tryptophan before bed, and that will increase your brain levels of serotonin and melatonin. If L-tryptophan is not available in your country, you can also take a very similar supplement called 5-hydroxytryptophan. Now, 5-hydroxytryptophan is actually one step closer to serotonin production than tryptophan. It joins the same pathway. When you take a supplement of 5-hydroxytryptophan, it increases your blood levels of 5-hydroxytryptophan. The 5-hydroxytryptophan goes into your brain. That increases brain levels of serotonin, and that increases brain levels of melatonin. So those L-tryptophan and 5-hydroxytryptophan are two supplements that you can take to increase your brain levels of serotonin, and they are effective. They have been shown to be effective in clinical studies involving humans in terms of causing sleepiness. The carbohydrate strategy, taking carbohydrates, is a very similar strategy. It does the same thing. It increases the brain levels of tryptophan. Now, the reason for that is because when you take in carbohydrates, your insulin levels increase. Insulin drives many of the amino acids out of the blood, such as the branched chain amino acids that compete for uptake in the brain with tryptophan. When they're removed from the plasma, the relative amounts of tryptophan in the plasma increase, and therefore the brain levels of tryptophan go up. So taking carbohydrates is a nutritional strategy that has a very similar effect to taking a supplement of L-tryptophan or 5-hydroxytryptophan. So that's something else I recommend that you can try if you're having difficulty sleeping. But I would always recommend that you have a look at your exercise levels and your stress first. You always deal with that area first. Then, if that's not working, you can you really need to understand that the nutritional strategies are probably not going to overcome any problems you have in your lifestyle. But if you find that you have improved your situation by correcting your exercise levels and your stress levels, then have a look at some of these dietary effects, these dietary strategies as well. And tryptophan and carbohydrates is one of those that you can add into this arsenal against insomnia. If we look at some other dietary strategies, another supplement that's actually been shown to induce sleep is magnesium. Magnesium has a relaxing effect on muscles and smooth muscle, skeletal muscle. And it does seem to cause dilation of blood vessels. It has a general relaxing effect in muscles, and this is because it's an antagonist to calcium, and calcium is the main divalent cation that causes muscle contraction. So magnesium, by opposing calcium, has a relaxing effect. And again, magnesium has been shown to have this ability to cause induced sleep. So magnesium is also worth looking at, and most people that consume a typical Western diet do have magnesium deficiencies, and that's because magnesium is present in the types of foods that we don't get in the typical Western diet. So whole grain foods, green leafy vegetables are good sources of magnesium. The typical Western diet obviously doesn't have those foods in it, and therefore most people who consume a typical Western diet are magnesium deficient, and therefore supplementing with magnesium can help induce sleep. The last thing I would suggest if you're having difficulty sleeping is to have a look at some of the herbs that you can buy. You can buy them as teas. When you take these herbs as a decoction, they are very effective. Two that I would particularly recommend. There are many. I couldn't go through them all, and I'm not an expert in herbal medicine, but there are many different plant remedies that are have been investigated in terms of their ability to cause and induce sleep. Two that are particularly effective that I am quite familiar with and quite aware of, and they have been quite heavily researched, are valerian and chamomile. Now, it's not entirely sure how these two herbs work, but it's thought that valerian works in a very similar way to benzodiazepines, which are obviously able to induce sleep, and it's thought also that chamomile has some effect on the GABA system in the brain. Now, these two herbs have been shown to induce sleep. They are effective. I know people that have taken them and have said that they do work. Valerian in particular. The main problem with valerian is it tastes very well, it's very difficult to describe the taste. It smells like old socks, and it's not very nice. So some people choose to take capsules instead of the tea, but I do think the tea works better. Chamomile's fairly neutral tasting, and it does seem to have this sleep-inducing property. So those are two herbs that I would also recommend. You can buy tea bags containing a variety of different herbs. Some, for example, also contain passion flower. That's been shown to induce sleep. And there's a long list of other herbs that have been shown to induce sleep. And they're all worth trying. If you have a look in a herbalist book, you can find a list of herbs that induce sleep, and they're all very safe. Many of these have been researched. They're available in teas, in capsules, and there's no real safety concern with them that I've ever come across. So there are some things to consider if you are having problems sleeping. The first strategy is to decrease your stress levels and make sure that you're either exercising, but not exercising too much and not exercising too late at night. Not eating large meals after you've exercised late at night, that can be a problem as well. Then have a look at your serotonin levels. If you feel that your serotonin needs a boost, you can take some carbohydrates. Carbohydrate foods are a very good way of boosting your serotonin levels. You can also take the amino acids l-tryptophan and 5-hydroxytryptophan. If you want to take a dietary supplement to help, magnesium is very useful for inducing sleep. And if you want to look at some herbs, then I would recommend valerian and chamomile as two of the most heavily researched herbs that have a proven track record of effectiveness and of safety. I hope that there are obviously other things that you can do. I can't go through everything, but those are the things that I highlighted and I thought to myself were probably the best strategies for inducing sleep. I hope that was helpful. If you have any particular things that you want to raise, any questions on this video, then please leave them in the comments box below, and as always I'll try to get back to you. If you have any feedback on things that you've tried that personally worked for you, that have caused you, have helped you sleep, if you were suffering from insomnia, then also please put those in the comments box, and I will obviously I'll read all the comments and I will reply to them as and when I have time. I will see you next week for another video, and in the meantime, take care.